Did you know that Max Verstappen could miss a key race this year due to an accumulation of penalty points? What started as a difficult season for Red Bull now threatens to jeopardize its entire championship. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, can Verstappen withstand this pressure, or are we seeing the beginning of the end for Red Bull? Is the most dominant team in modern F1 on the verge of collapse? Today we break down the true chaos facing Red Bull in 2025, technical issues, and an increasingly critical Verstappen. All this while McLaren steals the spotlight and the FIA tightens its regulatory grip. Max Verstappen, who until recently seemed unbeatable with Red Bull, now faces a completely different season. The crushing dominance we saw in 2023 has vanished, and what remains is a team struggling to understand why its car, the RB21, isn't performing as it should. From the first preseason tests, the signs were clear. The car was showing instability and extremely limited setup margin. Something that, in today's Formula One, puts you at a disadvantage compared to teams with a more predictable and versatile technical package. Red Bull began the 2025 season with high expectations. They were coming off a successful run of years, with multiple titles and a star driver in his prime. But as the first races progressed, inconsistencies in performance became apparent. At some circuits, like Suzuka, the car performed almost flawlessly. At others, like Bahrain, its performance dropped dramatically without a clear explanation. This variability baffled both the team and its supporters. The RB21 is plagued by problems inherited from the previous model, the RB20. This isn't just a one-off issue, but a series of technical features that have been raising concerns since last year. One of the most critical points is the rear axle's behavior. Drivers report understeer entering corners, which quickly turns into oversteer exiting. This not only makes driving difficult, but also limits the range of effective settings, making the car overly sensitive to small adjustments. If they don't get the setup right, performance plummets. Helmut Marko, always straightforward, put it bluntly, they've been seeing the same flaws for 2 years and still haven't been able to fix them. Those words not only reveal frustration, but also a clear admission that the problem is deeper than previously thought. And when a team like Red Bull, with all its technical resources and experience, can't find quick answers, alarm bells start ringing. Especially in a year in which McLaren has made a huge competitive leap and is threatening to take the throne left vacant by Red Bull. In the midst of the 2025 season, one of the most discussed topics in the paddock is not just who wins races, but how they do it. And in that sense, Red Bull has been at the center of a technical controversy that, while not resulting in direct sanctions, has called into question the legality of certain components of its car. It all began when the FIA announced a series of regulatory changes for 2026 that directly affect areas that, according to many analysts, Red Bull has been using to its technical advantage in recent years. This is not an obvious violation, but a regulatory adjustment that appears to be precisely targeting its car. The controversy revolves around the car's thermal management systems, particularly those that could affect the temperature of the wheels, brakes, or hubs. The new FIA technical directive prohibits any device, system, or procedure that serves to actively heat or cool these parts of the car. Although this rule officially comes into effect in 2026, its mere publication has sparked a wave of speculation. Was Red Bull using systems that skirted the current regulations? Was this an indirect way for the FIA to rein in the team without the need for a formal charge? The team's response has been, as is often the case in these cases, cautious but forceful. Christian Horner and his technical team have publicly backed these clarifications, stating that any adjustments that close loopholes are welcome because, in theory, the intent of the regulations was always clear. Chief Engineer Paul Monahan reinforced this narrative by asserting that if loopholes are being closed, then there shouldn't be any problems. This stance is undoubtedly a message to the FIA, but also a way to protect its reputation in the eyes of the public and other teams that had already raised eyebrows at its technical dominance. Despite the official statements, many within the paddock remain unconvinced. Some believe that this series of regulations is not preventative, but reactive, that the FIA was already aware of certain developments in the RB21 and decided to anticipate them before they spiraled out of control. There are even rumors that the protests came not only from McLaren, the team that benefited most from Red Bull's slump, but also from figures within Mercedes and Aston Martin. This has generated an environment of constant tension, where every technical update is scrutinized in detail and every rule change is interpreted as a political coup rather than a simple regulatory evolution. What is clear is that, regardless of whether Red Bull did something outside the rules or simply took advantage of gray area interpretations, the team can no longer operate with the same freedom as before. The new rules limit areas in which they have historically innovated, which inevitably reduces their margin of technical advantage. These types of restrictions not only affect the car's short-term development, but also pressure engineers to rethink their approach for 2026. The risk is not only losing performance this season, but also the entire technical concept becoming obsolete in less than a year. Max Verstappen has always been a driver who speaks out on the track, but when the situation demands it, he also knows how to make himself heard off it. And 2025 is proving to be one of those years where his voice carries more weight than ever within the Red Bull team. Verstappen typically maintains a relatively diplomatic profile, avoiding comments that generate direct conflict. However, as the races progress and the results don't pan out, his patience seems to be reaching its limit. What he once spoke cautiously, he now expresses with complete clarity. In several recent interviews, Max has openly acknowledged that the car isn't at the level needed to consistently fight for victories. He put it bluntly, "Our main problem is that our car isn't where we want it to be." It's a simple, yet powerful statement. It's not just a technical criticism, it's a way of sending a clear message to the team. Something must change, and it must change soon. Because when the team's star driver starts publicly pointing out the car's structural flaws, it's because many private conversations have already been exhausted without concrete results. And Verstappen isn't just pointing to the car's flaws. He's also hinted at a certain frustration with the way decisions are being made within the team. One example that made this evident was his reaction to Red Bull's handling of reserve driver Liam Lawson. When former driver Gito van der Garde posted on social media that the team's treatment of Lawson was a form of bullying, Verstappen didn't hesitate to publicly back up that comment. It's unusual for a driver of Max's caliber to get involved in such issues, much less do so against his own structure. But it shows that there are internal tensions that can no longer be hidden. He's also been very clear about his performance demands. According to him, it all comes down to one thing: if you have a good car, everything else falls into place. Strategies, pit stops, weather, none of that matters if the car is fast enough. And with that mindset, he's pushing Red Bull to return to the level of 2023, when he could dominate entire weekends without having to worry about minor details. Max wants that level of control back, and he's not willing to settle for anything less. That constant demand is part of what makes him a champion, but it's also a factor of pressure for the entire technical team trying to find solutions in the midst of a chaotic season. But beyond the criticism, what you see in Verstappen is a mix of determination and caution. Determination, because he continues to give his all in every race, even when the car isn't responding as it should. He's achieved good results in adverse conditions, which shows that he hasn't given up. According to Helmut Marko, if the updates scheduled for those dates don't work, the season could be considered lost in championship terms. It's a drastic scenario, but not an exaggerated one. With McLaren's current pace and the growing internal pressure in Milton Keynes, every Grand Prix counts, not only in points, but also in strategic direction for the rest of the year. Furthermore, this stretch of the season is key for another reason: technical and human resources. Red Bull must decide soon whether to continue investing in the RB21 or start allocating everything to the 2026 project, the year in which new regulations come into force that will completely change the philosophy of single-seaters. This puts the team at a dangerous crossroads. Betting everything on the present could leave them ill-prepared for the future. But abandoning the team too early could be seen as a sign of surrender, especially for a driver like Verstappen, who isn't used to settling. In this context, the attitude of the technical team will be crucial. Engineers like Pierre Wach, now at the helm following the gradual departure of Adrian Newey, have the responsibility of demonstrating that Red Bull can maintain its competitive DNA without relying on its most influential historical figure. The pressure isn't just about results. It's also symbolic. This stage will be a litmus test to see if the team is capable of reinventing itself amidst the storm. The decisions they make in these next two races, in Austria and Silverstone, will determine not only the fate of the championship, but also the perception of its long-term strength. The current situation of Red Bull is not a simple bad streak. It is the sum of questionable technical decisions, internal tensions that can no longer be hidden, and a competitive environment that has changed dramatically. Where before there was a clear gap between Red Bull and the rest, today there is parity, and in some cases, even superiority of its rivals. Max Verstappen, who used to compete with a car that seemed invincible, must now deal with an unpredictable car, under constant pressure and surrounded by technical and political uncertainty. This is not the script we expected by 2025, but it is the one that is happening, and each race seems to push the team a little more to the limit. The most worrying thing is that, for the first time in a long time, the future is not in its hands absolutely. The car's performance depends on factors that no longer dominate the ease of previous years. And Max, the most dominant pilot of the recent era, is beginning to make it clear that his patience has a limit. The signals are there: frustration in their statements, indirect criticisms of the team, and a growing pressure that could force important decisions sooner than we imagine. If Red Bull does not react on time, if he fails to reverse the technical course and recover internal trust, we could be witnessing the principle of a separation that until recently seemed impossible. All this leaves us with an inevitable question: will Verstappen continue to trust the Red Bull project if the current trend is maintained? Because the pilot has already shown that he has no problem talking clearly, and if he feels that the team can no longer offer him what is necessary to win, other paths could begin to seem more attractive. Formula One is as political as technical, and in a world where every tenth of second matters, loyalty lasts what the performance lasts. What happens in Austria and Silverstone could mark much more than the destination of the championship. It could mark the beginning of a new chapter in the most decisive pilot's career of this generation. And now it's your turn. I want to know what you think of all this. Do you think Red Bull will react on time and retain Verstappen in the center of his project? Or are we seeing the decline of an era that seemed unstoppable? Leave it to the comments, because your opinion is also part of this conversation.